Hello, my name is Natalie Wells, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the one holding everything together for a family that never truly saw me. I worked hard, built a life in Chicago, and gave more than I could afford. Cars, tuition money, endless support. Yet it was never enough. On my 34th birthday, I thought things would finally change, that they might celebrate me for once. Instead, what should have been a night of joy turned into the cruelest humiliation of my life. If this kind of story resonates with you, please share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep telling the stories that matter. Let's begin. On the morning of my 34th birthday, I told myself tonight would be different. Tonight my family would finally see me. The glass walls of my apartment caught the November sun, scattering it across polished oak floors. From the 40th floor, the lake stretched vast and cold, its surface silvered like armor. I stood with coffee in hand, watching my reflection in the window. Behind me on the mannequin hung the dress. Cream silk tailored to perfection, crystals catching the light like dew. $3,000 stitched into a single promise that I would no longer be overlooked, no longer treated like the convenient afterthought. I remembered being a child, hands raw from practicing scales on the piano, delivering each note with precision. Mother's applause was tepid, almost reluctant, while Melissa, stumbling through half the recital, earned a standing ovation for trying her best. That was the pattern carved into my bones. Melissa's failures romanticized my successes. Dismissed. Evelyn, my mother, made it an art form. Melissa has such a big heart, she would say. Or Natalie, your lucky things come easily to you. Luck. As if years of work sacrifice and nights alone at the office could be reduced to fortune. I shook the memories away and refocused on the day. Today was supposed to be different. I had secured a reservation at Alinea, the crown jewel of Chicago, dining the kind of place people bragged about for years after. I had called months ahead, nailed the timing, charmed the receptionist until I secured a private dining room. My friends had accepted their invitations with enthusiasm. Voices warm through the phone. Kate, my college confidant turned pediatrician. Jasmine, my colleague, who had seen me rise from assistant to executive. Daniel and Ryan, neighbors who became family. They had planned gifts, jokes, even whispered toasts. And then there was my blood family. The calls had been strained. Evelyn sighing about the late drive on a weeknight. Melissa asking if she could afford that fancy place. Chloe, her daughter, 17 eyes already rolling at the world, silent in the background. I offered to send money for a new dress so Chloe wouldn't feel out of place. Melissa accepted without thanks, as though it was the least I could do. They would come, perhaps late, perhaps bitter, but they would come. I moved through my closet, checking shoes, accessories. Everything arranged like a campaign. Tonight had to be flawless. For too many years, I had been their safety net. I had bought Melissa a car when her old one broke down. I had quietly wired money when rent loomed, signed off on emergency credit card charges that turned into designer bags and spa weekends. I had even purchased Chloe her own car when she turned 16, registered in my name, of course, so she could drive to dance practice. Still, every sacrifice was received with disdain, as though generosity was an insult. But tonight was meant to reset the balance. I rehearsed it in my mind. They would walk into Alinea, see me radiant in my dress, surrounded by friends who admired me, and realize the life I had built was not luck. Not arrogance, but the product of relentless effort. For once, they would see me. I pressed the dress against my body in the mirror, the cream silk flowing down like water. I smiled, slow and deliberate. Tonight, I whispered to the empty room, they'll have to see me. The ringtone cut through the moment. My phone buzzed across the marble counter. I picked it up, my mother's name glowing on the screen. For an instant, I imagined warmth, a genuine birthday wish. Instead, her voice carried irritation, as if she had been forced into the call. "We might be late, Natalie," she said. "Chloe has dance practice. We'll see if we can make it." My smile faltered, but I kept my voice bright. "It's Alinea, Mom. Please try. It means a lot." Her pause was cool, dismissive. "We'll see." The line went dead and the apartment felt colder. I looked back at the cream silk, beautiful and fragile, knowing how easily it could stain. And for the first time that morning, a shadow touched the edges of my hope. When my friends filled the private room with laughter, my family was nowhere to be seen. The private dining room at Alinea shimmered with understated luxury. Candlelight flickered against white linen glassware sparkled, and outside the tall windows, Lake Michigan stretched like a dark mirror. At 7 o'clock sharp, my friends were already seated. Kate handing me a carefully wrapped gift, Jasmine, sliding a handwritten card across the table. Daniel and Ryan bringing a box tied with a comically oversized ribbon that made the server laugh as it toppled sideways. We were warm at ease. Plates of oysters and beet towers appeared, glasses clinked, and jokes flowed as though we'd been waiting for this exact night. Ryan toasted to rare reservations, and even rarer women, and laughter rose in chorus. For a moment, I believed the evening would glow without interruption. At 7:18, the door opened. Evelyn entered first, expression, unreadable perfume preceding her. Melissa followed with her usual look of annoyance, and Chloe trailed behind, eyes glued to her phone. They handed their coats to the staff without thanks. Traffic, my mother murmured flatly, as if that excused their indifference. I rose to greet them, forcing warmth into my smile, but their response was perfunctory. My friends, ever gracious, tried to make conversation. Kate asked about their drive, Jasmine complimented Chloe's outfit. Evelyn shifted uncomfortably, Melissa offered curt replies, and Chloe didn't lift her gaze from her screen. The room itself seemed to change temperature. Champagne was poured, bubbles rising like fragile promises. Jasmine gave me a supportive nod. Evelyn leaned back in her chair as she always did before downplaying something. I hope this wasn't too difficult to arrange, she said, eyes flicking around the room. Though Natalie, is this really appropriate for a weeknight? Kate gently corrected her. It's Sunday, but Melissa smirked anyway. Daniel stood to toast. He spoke of friendship, of neighbors who become family, of my ability to turn competence into something that felt like magic. Kate raised her glass, next her voice steady. To the woman who taught me that showing up is a love language. Jasmine followed. To the executive who never forgets to be human. Each word pressed against my heart with unexpected force. When it was my family's turn, Evelyn merely said, 34 already. Time flies. Melissa raised her glass without enthusiasm. Chloe kept scrolling. I swallowed the sting and decided to share something that mattered. Chloe, I began. I've been saving for your education since you were born. It's not everything, but enough to make real choices possible. Scholarship, state, schools, maybe even a dance program, there are options. The room fell silent. Chloe finally looked up, her gaze sharp. Melissa's eyes narrowed, and Evelyn shifted her napkin with deliberate precision. You never mentioned this, my mother said coolly. I wanted it to be a surprise, I explained. I thought tonight? Of course you did. Melissa cut in, her tone acidic. It's about the performance, isn't it? The private room, the dress, the big announcement. Kate reached for my arm beneath the table, grounding me. I steadied my voice. It's about Chloe's future. No strings attached. Chloe's eyes locked onto mine, hard and unforgiving. The server placed a plate in front of her, an edible garden of herbs and blossoms, and she tapped it with her fork. So you get to be the hero, she said evenly. And we're supposed to clap like it's a show. Evelyn touched her wrist lightly, not in rebuke, but in solidarity. The air thickened. My friends sat uncomfortably, their smiles frozen. It was never about being a hero, I said softly. It was simply about caring. Evelyn sighed, the sound of dismissal I knew too well. Natalie, money isn't everything. She glanced at Melissa, who nodded in agreement. You do work hard at appearances. Jasmine tried to lighten it. If you mean the reservation, then yes. That was hard, but the moment had already curdled. Melissa turned her bracelet under the light. We managed just fine. Some of us don't have time for fancy offices and big gestures. Chloe smirked. The intermezzo arrived, apple and mint, meant to cleanse the palate, but no one admired it. I could feel the eyes of strangers outside the room flicking toward us. Chloe, I tried again. If you're considering city programs, I could. She pushed her chair back slightly. Her voice carried across the table with deliberate clarity. We don't need your charity. Stop acting like you're better than us. The words cut clean through the air, leaving only silence in their wake. I placed my glass carefully on the table, aligning it with the napkin's fold. It was an offer, I said quietly. Nothing more. Evelyn smiled faintly, a performance in itself. Well, let's not make a scene. Kate mouthed, breathe, and squeezed my arm. I did. The servers brought the next course, the room resumed its motions, the lake outside remained unchanged. But something inside me shifted irrevocably. As the candles burned lower, Melissa leaned toward Chloe, whispering something into her ear. Chloe's lips twitched, then curved into a sly smile. Both of them exchanged a glance, relaxed, complicit, conspiratorial. I never saw the glass tip, only the red tide exploding across my dress. The world slowed into shards of sound. The sharp clink of ice, the muffled gasp of someone across the room, the sickening splash as cranberry cocktail drenched silk. It spread like wildfire across the cream fabric, seeping into every fold, every thread, a violent bloom of red that screamed louder than any insult ever could. For a heartbeat, I could not move. My body froze in my mind, unwilling to accept that Chloe, 17, smirking with her phone raised, had just flung humiliation into my lap and broadcast it live. Her voice cut through the stunned silence, cruel and rehearsed. Now you look as cheap as you really are. Laughter did not follow. Only the hush of diners turning their heads, forks pausing, midair, eyes widening at the spectacle. From the corner of my vision, I caught Melissa's lips curve into a thin smile, satisfaction hidden but not enough. Evelyn's hand rested gently on Chloe's shoulder as if guiding a trembling child. She didn't chastise her. She whispered something soothing, almost proud. My friends erupted before I could. Daniel half rose, fists clenched, but I raised a hand, halting him. Kate's voice trembled with rage, Jasmine muttered under her breath. Ryan cursed softly. The servers froze mid-step, unsure whether to intervene. The dress, my dress, $3,000 of silk of hope of promise, clung wet and heavy against my skin. I thought of how I had pressed it lovingly to my body that morning, whispering that tonight they would finally see me. And now they did, but not as I had dreamed. Chloe's smirk widened as she panned her phone toward me, live stream glowing bright in her hand. Somewhere behind us, a diner's camera caught everything. The splash, the smirk, Melissa's low murmur, clear enough to hear. Do it. A woman at the next table pressed her lips tight, torn between pity and fascination, her lens fixed on me. I forced my breathing steady. My pulse screamed for me to lash out, to shout, to break, but I refused to give them that victory. Instead, I reached for a napkin, dabbing at the ruined fabric with composure so sharp it felt like armor. It's fine, I heard myself say, though nothing was fine. The silence deepened heavier than the stain on my chest. Evelyn leaned toward Chloe, murmuring, "Teenagers always dramatic, as if the destruction of my dignity was nothing but youthful mischief." Melissa chuckled under her breath, eyes glinting. Every gaze in that room pressed against me. Strangers, friends, family. My humiliation complete, sealed in red. But then I lifted my head. Across the restaurant, a camera lens still pointed directly at me, unblinking, recording. My eyes met it and something inside me hardened. Heat burned away shame, leaving only resolve. I sat straighter, shoulders square, staring into the recording device not as prey, but as someone who had just discovered a weapon. At dawn, my pain cooled into something sharper: policies, paperwork, and a plan. Chicago's skyline bled from indigo into pale gray as I stood by my window, a mug of coffee cooling in my hand. The ache from last night's humiliation still throbbed under my skin, but it no longer burned. It crystallized. I thought about the red tide soaking into silk, about Chloe's triumphant smirk, about Melissa's whisper. Do it caught clearly in that stranger's recording. It hadn't been an accident. It had been an ambush. And ambushes had consequences. By 5:45, I was at my desk, laptop open, bank app, glowing. One phone call to the credit card company ended years of indulgence. Melissa's emergency card canceled, a new number issued. Any pending charges will still process, the representative warned. That's fine, I said evenly, but no new charges. Ever. I ended the call and exhaled, a weight already lifting. Then I stopped the monthly transfers I'd been sending like an IV drip into their account. Thousands of dollars bled away under the guise of helping family. The artery was closed. Next came the car. A safe sedan I had purchased in my own name, insured on my policy, handed over to Chloe like a peace offering she never appreciated. I dialed a towing company. Yes, I'm the legal owner, I explained, emailing proof of registration and insurance, while the dispatcher confirmed the pickup time. Discreet, please. She'll fight you. The man chuckled. We've handled worse. By 7:30, Daniel and Ryan were waiting outside the school lot to make sure the retrieval went smoothly. We'll text you when it's done, Ryan promised. I trusted him. He'd once handled a belligerent tenant dispute in our building with more calm than most lawyers. At 8, Thomas answered on the first ring. I heard what happened, he said grimly. I explained my plan: financial cutoff, asset retrieval, legal boundaries. He approved. Send me everything. I'll draft a cease and desist for the social media harassment. Preserve every post, every comment, the live stream too. That "do it" will be damning. His voice hardened. They wanted public spectacle. We'll give them public consequence. By 9, my inbox began filling. Jasmine had emailed the restaurant, confirmed their overhead cameras captured everything. She also forwarded a stranger's direct message, a video from the adjacent table. The sound was clear, cruel, Melissa's voice instructing Chloe, "Do it." The evidence tightened like a noose. Janet called just after 10. She had assembled the numbers line by line. Natalie, she said, in the past 5 years, you've transferred over $78,000. Add the car, the insurance, the extras, well over $100,000. Hearing it aloud was staggering, like seeing my generosity written in blood across a ledger. Without that drain, she continued, your retirement advances by nearly 5 years. You could buy the lake house you always dreamed about. I closed my eyes. Freedom had a number, and it was finally mine to keep. By 11, the car was safely in my garage. Daniel texted a picture of the keys on my counter. All yours again. Relief surged through me, clean and cold, and then the intercom buzzed. The doorman's voice, polite but edged with curiosity. Ms. Wells, your mother's sister and niece are downstairs. They say they have an appointment with you at 3 o'clock. My hand hovered over the button. So soon the storm was already at my door. I set folders down the way a surgeon lays out instruments, purposeful, labeled impossible to mistake. The dining table caught the late afternoon light. Dust motes hung like witnesses. I'd reserved 4 chairs and left the rest, pushed back a small geography lesson. This is my home, my ground, my terms. The bell chimed at 3. Evelyn swept in first with that martyred calm she wears to funerals. Melissa stalked behind her, already bristling, and Chloe drifted last, phone in hand, chin up like a dare. None of them noticed the neat stacks on the table. They did, however, notice the absence of snacks. Sit, Evelyn tried a smile. Natalie, darling, we came to clear the air. We'll start with the part we can measure, I said, sliding the first folder forward. Inside 5 years of bank transfers, color-coded by month, annotated in the margins. This is the money I have sent to you, Melissa. Rent emergencies, cash advances, utilities, dance shoes, car repairs, weekend, family getaways. Melissa snorted. So now you're going to itemize compassion. No, I tapped the totals. I'm going to itemize facts. 78,000 transferred directly. Separate from the car insurance and maintenance I paid for. Separate from the credit card charges you labeled emergency, that include restaurants, salons, and designer outlets. Evelyn's fingers tightened around her purse straps. Family helps family. I said, and I will no longer be your bank. I slid the second folder out, purchase agreement title, registration insurance declarations. Chloe glanced at the header and went pale. The sedan, I said evenly, is legally mine. Registered to me, insured by me. Loaned to you, Chloe, as a privilege. That privilege ended this morning. The vehicle is back in my garage. You can't do that. Chloe snapped, bravado fraying. I need it for school, for dance. You need transportation, I said. You do not need my property. Bus routes exist. So do carpools. Melissa leaned forward, pointing. You gave her that car? I allowed her to use it, I corrected. Words matter. I slid photos across the table, Chloe posing with the sedan, captions tagging it my ride. Words matter online too. Evelyn inhaled as if to release a carefully rehearsed speech. Natalie, you're emotional. This isn't. We're not done. I opened the third folder. Glossy printouts, timestamps. Screenshots of Chloe's livestream with the red splash midair. Comments stacking up, laughing emojis, cheap shots. A still frame of my ruined dress. Another of Chloe's caption. Then I reached for my phone, tapped play, and set it between us. The room filled with the dining room of Alenia, duplicated and damning. The camera from the adjacent table caught the angle of Chloe's elbow, the tilt of the glass, my startled intake of breath, and faint but unmistakable Melissa's whisper right before the throw. Do it. Evelyn's mouth opened and stayed that way. Melissa's face tightened, then hardened. You can barely hear that, she said. I have the restaurant's overhead footage too, I said. Jasmine requested it, and management obliged. I gestured to the second clip on my screen. This one didn't include sound, but it didn't need it. Melissa's lean toward Chloe, the shared glance, the timing. 2 cameras, 1 story. Chloe folded in on herself by a degree fingers, worrying the seam of her sleeve. It was a joke, she said, small but defiant. Everyone live streams. Everyone, my voice stayed level. Or just bullies who need an audience. Evelyn's tone turned pleading. She's a teenager. She made a mistake. A planned one, I said. With an audience. With intent. I looked at Melissa. Your intent. Melissa lifted her chin. You're not dragging my daughter into court over a drink. She laughed once brittle. You love a spectacle. I breathed in, let it out slowly, and tasted the moment I had been walking toward since last night. I don't want a spectacle, I said. I want boundaries. I gathered the papers into a straight stack, squared the corners, then met each of their eyes. I won't finance my own humiliation. Not anymore. The sentence landed with a soft finality that felt like a door clicking shut. Evelyn's eyes shimmered, wounded by something she could no longer bend to her narrative. Melissa's lips thinned to a blade. Chloe stared at the table, cheeks blotching red. My laptop chimed. That will be my attorney, I said and answered. Thomas's face appeared crisp and calm. Ms. Wells, he said, professional. Now the cease and desist has been served to Ms. Carter and to Chloe's account via counsel. We are requesting immediate removal of all defamatory content and a public apology within 48 hours. Failure to comply will prompt further action under defamation and harassment statutes. We have preserved the live stream, the comments, the adjacent table video with the do it audio and the restaurant's overhead footage. Melissa barked a laugh. Defamation over a dress. Thomas didn't blink. Over statements and actions intended to harm Ms. Wells's reputation and dignity. The dress is a damage line item. The behavior is the claim. Chloe finally looked at the screen. If I delete it, she said, voice small, is it? Over. You'll also post a public apology of substance. Thomas replied. And Ms. Carter will arrange restitution for the damaged garment and other losses Ms. Wells itemized. A payment plan is acceptable provided it's documented. He paused. Ms. Wells, anything to add? Yes, I said, and turned back to my family. This is not punishment. This is the consequence of years of disrespect condensed into one crystal clear night. The credit line is closed. The transfers have stopped. The car is back. The posts will come down. The apology will go up. And from this moment forward, you will not speak to me in the language of entitlement. Evelyn's composure cracked. Natalie, please, I love you, I said, and surprised myself with how true it sounded. But love without respect is just leverage, and I'm no one's leverage anymore. For a breath, no one moved. Outside, a siren dopplered somewhere along the lake. Inside, the light thinned toward evening. Melissa's gaze flicked to Chloe, to the folders, to the phone that still displayed her whispered instruction like a verdict. She opened her mouth, then closed it. A knock broke the stalemate firm official. Through the peephole, I saw navy blue and the glint of brass beside our building's security. I didn't perform surprise. 2 uniformed officers stepped in with the building manager trailing. Ms. Wells, one said evenly. We've received multiple video submissions regarding last night's incident. Weed behind me, Melissa froze, her defiance flickering out. Chloe's face drained of color as though the cocktail she'd thrown had come Russian. The stains had faded, but the outlines remained. By late January, the city was locked in a freeze, the lake a sheet of steel under pale skies. 2 months had passed since the night that had broken and rebuilt me. I walked into Thomas's office, leather folders stacked before him, the air dry with the smell of paper and ink. He slid the settlement across the table, Melissa's repayment plan, Chloe's signed public apology, the formal takedown of every post. My pen hovered a second before I pressed it down. The scratch of ink across the page sounded louder than any gavel. The civil agreement was finished. No courtroom spectacle, no need for more humiliation, only boundaries carved into law. Melissa would pay in installments, small but steady. Chloe's apology had already gone live, stiff teenage pride lacing through the words, but visible to the same hundreds who had cheered my dress's destruction. Evelyn had signed 2 acknowledgement that her favoritism had fueled years of entitlement. Paper signatures seals the weapons of my new war. Later that week, in the glass towers downtown, my team surprised me. A closed-door meeting with senior partners turned into a recognition ceremony. You handled a personal crisis with professionalism most leaders would crumble under, my director said. The new account worth millions was handed to me without hesitation. Applause rippled around the room. My name, not as someone's daughter or sister, but as a leader, stood clear. For the first time, I realized my reputation no longer needed defending, it was its own fortress. At my mother's kitchen table, warmth from the oven wrapped around us. The air carried roasted herbs and something older, softer, the fragile attempt at reconciliation. Chloe slid an envelope across the table. Inside, $200 in carefully counted bills. Her hand shook, but her voice was steady. I can't fix everything, Aunt Natalie, but I want to start here. I closed the envelope gently, pushing it back toward her. I accept the respect more than the money. That's worth more than anything. For once, she didn't roll her eyes. She nodded, and for the first time since she was a child, she looked at me without resentment. Melissa spoke of night classes, accounting a skill that would keep her afloat without my safety net. Evelyn's eyes watered as she lifted a plain glass of wine, voice trembling but clear. To my daughter, she said, who taught us that love without respect is not love at all. The toast fell quiet over the table, not grand, not gilded, but finally equal. Driving home through the frost-lined streets, I carried a garment bag on the seat beside me. Inside lay the silk dress cleaned, but never the same faint shadows where crimson had once burned. I touched the fabric as the lights of Chicago flickered by. My phone buzzed with a text to Kate, next year no spectacle, just the people who show up. I rolled down the window, cold air sharp against my face, and let it wash over me. The outlines remained yes, but they no longer marked my ruin. They traced my survival proof that I had drawn the lines, signed the boundaries, and chosen how I would be seen, this time on my own terms. The silk may have been stained, but the lesson was carved deeper than any fabric could hold. Betrayal can wound, yet it also forges steel. Justice did not come in the night of humiliation, but in the clear light of consequence, where money, paper, and truth spoke louder than cruelty ever could. When injustice is met with unshaken resolve, the final verdict echoes longer than the insult that began it. Like a tide that no wall can hold back, truth will always find its way through. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. Type 1 if you felt the same.